Hey everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Ninja Bunny Crafting. I had a long moment of thinking about what this very first episode was going to be about, what I would talk about, what I would work on with you guys. And I had a long moment of thinking, and I was just eating dinner, and I came to a thought. Well, why don't I start with a basic thing everybody can use, and that's dungeon tiles. I've got a whole stack of them right here, different sizes and variations that I use all the time. And I can't tell you how useful these things end up being. So, instead of just telling you how useful they'll be, how about I show you how to craft a couple of 3-inch by 3-inch tiles, and we'll figure out from there if you like it or not. Hopefully you do. Let's get down to it. Be using pink insulation foam board. Mine here is about a ½ inch thick, and I'm going to be marking it at about 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters for my metric using viewers. You don't need insulation board for these tiles, however, it is my preferred medium for it. You can use things like cardstock, cardboard, even ready core foam board from the Dollar Tree, or for the Canadian viewers, the Dollarama. You can even use regular old-fashioned sheets of paper, just glued together in a nice couple of layers. That way you've got some rigidity. Now, when you go to make this, you're going to want to have things like a ruler and a really sharp pencil. Or in my case, I'm using a fine tip Sharpie pen. Fine tip Sharpie pens, in my opinion, work really well for laying out and doing small detail on this kind of foam. Where can you find pink insulation board? You can find it at things like Home Depot or Lowe's. If you're lucky and you've got a construction project in your area, you might be able to stop by and ask some of the workers for scrap pieces of insulation board. More than likely, they'll be willing to give it to you. Now, I started making dungeon tiles a few years ago, actually. And I've been running games for about 20 years. And I have been using Theater of the Mind for a lot of that. Occasionally ending up pulling out dice or pennies or even chess pieces going, hey, this is where you're at and whatnot. And then a few years ago, I started watching some crafting videos myself and decided I wanted to give dungeon tiles a try. And from there, I just started picking up more and more techniques, which honestly, I think this is one of the best starting points for the crafting hobby. With just a handful of dungeon tiles, you can create elaborate rooms in a dungeon for a fight scene or the entire dungeon itself, and you can alter and change it at your will thanks to just these small little tiles. And if small tiles aren't going to cut it for you, this technique will let you learn to cut giant tiles, circular tiles, thin tiles, any kind you need. That's the beauty of a dungeon tile, is it just suits what you need when you need it. Now, as far as cutting your foam goes, or your cardboard, you can use several different types of tools. In this case, I am going to be using a handheld hot wire cutter so that I can get a few shakes and grooves from my hand to give me a old stone texture of sorts to it. But you can use a razor knife, a sharp kitchen knife. If need be, you could use a bandsaw, as long as it's able to cut the foam. Now, as you can see here, my hot wire foam cutter came with a pen. And these pens are nice, much like Sharpies, in that they are chemically made, and their ink is, to kind of eat a little bit of the foam away and give you a nice groove in it that something like a hot wire cutter or even a razor knife can follow a little bit easier. Now, if you're going to be using a hot wire cutter, use a mask. As you can see, I'm wearing one. This isn't because of anything stupid or silly. It's because, well, you are cutting into fiberglass board, and those fumes stink and can give you a headache. They are toxic, folks, no matter what way we slice it. Cutting pun intended. Like I said, I'm going with a hot wire cutter for this, a handheld one,
because my hands will have a little bit of a tremor in them naturally, and that's going to give me that kind of jaggedy rock look that I'm looking for when I make dungeon tiles. Again, if you don't want that kind of shaky groove, as you can see there, my hand kind of gets in the way, apologies. Just use a regular knife. A razor blade or a really sharp kitchen knife is going to treat you just well. If you're a weirdo, you can heat the blades up and it'll cut through the foam like butter, but again, I would recommend a mask. Now, once you have your basic shape cut out, there are two ways to do this next step. I like to give a little bit of a marking at 1 inch in each way. That way I have a 3 by 3 inch or 7.5 centimeter tile with its grid pattern. Now I'll mark them first, and in this case, again, I'm using a sharp tip Sharpie so that it cuts into the foam with its ink and leaves a nice little groove for me. And once you get your texturing done, which will be the next step you see, you can then go through and I'll show you two different ways to make or cut in your grid pattern. Now the technique I'm using for the grid pattern is going to hide the grid pattern within the tiles in a natural look, as if there's no grid pattern at all, it's just tiles of stone. I like to do this because it makes it a little bit easier to mark movement. So once you've got your marks made for where it's going to go, you'll do something like this. Take a rolled up ball of tinfoil and just press really hard into that stuff, as hard as you can. And if you don't want to waste tinfoil to get that kind of texture in there, go outside and get a rock. They're cheap, they're free, and you just press into that stuff really hard. Now, again, I'm using the pink insulation foam insulation board. It is gonna hold a shape, but not as well as, like, say, some of the green board that you can get for hobbying that does this. Again, you don't want to use things from like Michaels that are for like flower arrangements. That foam does not do this. It will not hold a shape. As for, like I said, the grid tile. Now here I'm going to use a Sharpie again, and again press semi-hard with it, just enough that I can get into it, and it's going to leave a nice groove while cutting into the foam a little bit. And when you do this, you can go back over it. I usually do at least twice. See there? And I'll go over it again. And don't worry, if you're using the Sharpie method, it might tear the foam. Do not worry about that at all. Do not worry about that. It's just going to add some character and texture to that dungeon tile to give it a weathered and aged look, like it's been here for at least a century or more. As you can see right there, I'm letting it just tear it, and then I'm going to add in some cracks on a couple of tiles with it to give it that aged and weathered look. The other method that you're going to see right here, take a razor blade, just a little bit, and you want to just score it, not too deep. Go too deep, it kind of is a pain in the neck. So give it a slight score, going left to right, or right to left, however you do it, just getting it that nice little squared look. Once you've got it scored, grab a sharp pencil, or again, in this case, a Sharpie pen, and then go right through it. It'll put a nice groove in there, and it looks like somebody just totally poured that stuff a century ago, a nice craftsman. And again, if you want some more details, take a sharpened pencil, or a Sharpie in my case, and add in a crack or two. It looks just awesome. And you don't have to do this on every single dungeon tile or even on all the tiles themselves. Every other one, every other three looks great, and it gives it a unique style. Next, we need to seal these guys. So let's finish up this tile and then get to sealing, okay? For the sealing part, what we're going to need is a paintbrush, some matte Mod Podge, and black matte acrylic paint. Now, I like to do a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts black paint to 1 part Mod Podge. You can see how to create this stuff over on Blackmagic Craft. He has an entire video on creating this awesome black Mod Podge combo. Now, get yourself a good brush when you do this. Even if it's the cardboard guys here, you're going to want a good brush and you're going to want to cover all of this. I tend to do the tops and sides, wait for everything to dry, and then I'll hit the bottoms of these guys. I do it in black, by the way, because when you're doing something like a stone texture or cement-like paint scheme, a black undercoat really helps because you don't need to do as many covers of gray or white. You can get away with a thin coat and then a thin dry brushing, and it really makes it look like weathered and aged stone or cement. And that black undercoat doesn't just help with cement or stone texturing and coloring. It also helps if you're doing wood tiles like this. Again, that black undercoat just helps when you put in any details or dry brushing. I cannot state enough how much it helps just adding the illusion of depth to something. One of the fun parts about the Blackmagic sealing here is that it will help harden and seal the foam, making it way, way tougher against wear and tear over times, and making it much harder for it to lose any of the definition you're putting in. The other reason I really enjoy it is once you've finished coating everything in this and you've got your entire little piece of work there, foam tile or whatever you're going to be working on, covered in this black Mod Podge, you can really start to see that idea that was in your head taking shape and becoming reality. I honestly didn't realize how much I would see a project come to life from just it being pure black. Honestly, it'll amaze you. You'll really start to have that great feeling of, holy crap, I did this. And as you can see here, I'm not using any gloves because Mod Podge and black acrylic paint aren't toxic and aren't going to hurt my hands. However, if you don't want to sit there washing up your hands after doing a project like this, some rubber gloves or plastic, latex gloves are a perfect option. And you don't have to spend time with Dawn dish soap in the sink. So, as you see here, I'm just going to hit the bottoms real quick as well. I'm not going to do as heavy a coating on the bottoms, mostly because I don't plan to use the bottoms. I don't double side my tiles. However, if you did want to do this way, like I am exactly, and you're like, oh man, I need a smooth stone surface, you could always flip the tiles over and use them as that. But me personally, I don't do that. I have a whole separate set of wooden tiles for that, and tiles made specifically to look like road work or cobblestone for a city street, which I might do a video on later. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see that. Once you've finished getting all of your sealing and black Mod Podge on there, you're going to want to let it dry. And then, once it's dried, you're going to want to get yourself some dark gray. Now remember to thin out this paint. You want it thin because you don't want it to lose these details that you use that rock or tinfoil ball for. And unwatered down acrylic paint is going to do that. Now you don't have to worry too much about making it too thick or whatnot on this coat. Like I said, the black undercoat here is going to help give the illusion of texture and depth on these pieces. Now I tend to do the tops first. That way I can let it dry, and then I'm able to hit the sides, let them dry, and then I paint the bottoms. Somebody with ADHD, I love painting, but the worst part for me is letting things dry. I just want to keep moving on a project every single time I start one. I want to just go, 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 go. So if you're like me and it comes to this stage and you love painting, but waiting for it to dry, just, there are two options you can do. You can walk away, go have a cup of coffee, eat a lunch, play a video game, something. Or you can get a fan, turn it on, let it blow, see if it just helps dry up these things a little bit quicker. But no matter what option you choose, the universal rule still applies. You have to wait for this paint to dry. You cannot start the next process with wet paint. Trust me, it will ruin everything. Because the next process is called dry brushing. And it's what it says. Things have to be dry. Everything. Right down to your brush. So, remember to clean your brush after the gray step. Now in dry brushing, as you can see here, I'm going to just take some antique white or any off-white, and I'm going to take a brush and load it up with the paint. A makeup brush is the best choice for this, and you can get them at the Dollar Tree or see if somebody you know has a spare old one they're not using. Then grab a paper towel after you load up with the paint and just take 98% of that paint off. You are just going to keep rubbing it on that piece of paper until you barely see it leaving a mark. And then press down and go into little circular motions, left, right, up, down, and all those little details that you would put in with the tinfoil ball or the rock are going to start to pop right out. As you can see right here on the sides, on the top where the grid is, just go to town. And it's going to make everything pop out, and it's going to look weathered and aged and just perfect. Now, there is a second step you can do this, but I'm not a fan of that step for my tiles. I'm a fan for everything else in that, and that is a dark wash. A dark wash is simply taking a drop of soap, dish soap, Dawn soap, hand soap, whatever. Just a drop of soap, a few drops of paint. In this case, usually black paint. You want to go maybe 3-4 good drops. By drops, I mean squeezes. And then water. Really thin it down till the paint is extremely watered down. Like, extremely flows. And then you can brush it over the top of these guys, and it'll help those low areas get a little bit darker. However, I find on my tiles when I do that, I end up not liking the muting of the dry brushing. That's a personal preference on everyone. And if you really want to give it a rock look, you can add a little bit of like silver acrylic paint to that along with the black paint, and it'll help kind of give a little sheen or sparkle to the stone. And that's it. That's everything you need for a dungeon tile. You see me stack them here to kind of make a little L. Let's hit this one here real quick. Yeah, give it a little bit of extra pop. And that's it. That's all you need for a set of dungeon tiles.
And there you have it, guys. Those are just 3 simple little ones. I banged them out about hour and a half counting time for paint to dry. And that's the longest part of the process. Again, you can use anything you like material-wise. You could use cardboard. You can use just plain paper. You could use anything, like I said. But I prefer, this pink styrofoam insulation foam stuff that I prefer to use. And, I can just have it in so many different sizes and textures. Like this little 1-inch one here. Little thin little hidden path one. It's amazing what you can create. I hope today that you guys have found this episode interesting. Please give me a like and a subscribe. It helps out small little channels like mine, and we'll have a Patreon up soon if you really want to help us. That way you can get early access to these videos as well as ad free so that nothing pops up. So again, remember folks, get out there and craft.